Hey folks, welcome back. So we have Ariel Mundo. He's a PhD candidate in the Department of Biomedical Engineering at University of Arkansas. And he's very interested in this intersection of open science and biology and statistics. So a perfect person to be presenting. So thank you very much, Ariel.
Thank you, Rohan, for the kind introduction. Really excited to be here. I was telling Rohan a moment ago that today here in Arkansas, in Fayetteville, where the university is, it's actually colder than Toronto. So it's a perfect day for a mix of statistics, biomedical research, and some cold weather. So let me start, and I'm gonna add this to my slides. All right. So my talk is basically about what I think is really, really important in this field, and it's a mix about my own experience and some things I've learned about going along in this journey of research. So the motivation for this talk comes from the well-known reproducibility crisis in biomedical research, and this is pretty well known. This is pretty well established. People complain about this all the time, saying that we don't have available data sets, and really interesting to hear from people in demography that they are accustomed to sharing their data. This is not the case in biomedical research. And then there are multiple angles to this issue, but people have talked in length about this before. For example, people have said that reasons because of why we don't have reproducible biomedical research is because we don't train people in the proper way. So new people come with the wrong ideas, and they use the wrong tools for that can help reproducibility. There is an inherent scarcity in resources. So say, for example, you're working with clinical samples, tissue samples that have come from some patients. You would not expect that someone else is going to be able to get those same samples and use them to replicate whatever you're doing. So that's a challenge as well. Something else people have mentioned is that there is this pressure to perform, and sometimes we tend to cut corners. So this happens as well. This is something that also is pretty much driven by institutions. And we also can have this problem where we encourage only positive results. We don't want to see negative results, and this biases what we publish, what we do. So this is another problem. But I won't be talking about today about all these issues. They have been pretty well covered by other people. Today, I would like to talk a little bit more about how we actually misuse statistics in biomedical research, and this happens a lot. Now, even this has been pretty well documented. So this is a screenshot from a paper that came out in 2016. The authors gave 10 simple rules for effective statistical practice. This is a really nice paper, and they gave some ideas on how to improve how we do statistics. So for example, they say that the 10 points they had among those were some that say, recognize that signals come with noise. You should also plan ahead and think carefully about how you want to collect your data. Plan for some things that you may not expect to happen, but that eventually will happen when you're doing some experiments. Worry about how your data, the quality of it, that's important as well. And of course, keep it simple. So this has been also pretty well documented. However, I believe and I feel that for most of us in biomedical research, the concept of reproducibility is still somewhat abstract. And I find that there's actually a disconnect between what we should be doing and what we actually do. Because at the end of the day, sure, there are papers, we know we have a problem, but what does actually reproducibility mean for a PhD student or a recent postdoc? Most of the time, the reality is that we know that this is a problem, but we don't know how to tackle it. And this brings me again to the motivation for this talk. I know this is a statistical-based conference, but I have to say that I used to hate statistics. When I was doing my undergrad, I really didn't like statistics. So big exclamation mark there. And I think one of the problems was because I couldn't grasp the actual utility of what I was doing. And sure, by the end of my stats class, I could do in a mechanical fashion a t-test and ANOVA, but the reason why and the mechanics behind were always obscure to me. And I have to say that it didn't help also that the examples and the way I learned statistics was you have a factory and you have 3 different machines, and the machines mold concrete, for example, and you want to do some tests there. Or examples with textiles, or examples with things that I never was gonna use or apply. And when my background is in chemical engineering, so those things never had any, I didn't have any connection with those things. And then when I went into grad school and I did started my PhD, I had to take a stats class again. But I still didn't like it, and I felt that was something I needed to do. But it was just something I had to do, and I was going to learn again how to do t-tests and ANOVAs in a mechanical fashion and be done with it, basically. And I had the same problem. My stats class in grad school followed the same way of thinking, examples about machines, examples about things that weren't really the things I was working at the time. So it was really hard to connect one thing to another. But there is a problem with all of this. And the problem is actually that you have a big problem when you are collecting data in the lab or in the field and you are ready to analyze it. You all have seen this image, and this is basically what I was trying to get before that. So you can learn statistics with, the IRIS data set or empty cards and really nice, do your plots, do your graphs. The problem is that the real data from the real world doesn't look like that at all most of the time. And I'll give a quick example. So this is not my data. This is from a paper that came last year. And what people here were basically doing is they are measuring the size of a volume of a tumor over time. And of course, they are giving a group of, I think these were mice, but basically they were giving radiation to a group. So you see that radiation is causing an effect. Tumor size is not growing very much across time. The group that does not receive treatment has an increase in volume, tumor volume. When I was in the second year of my PhD, I had finalized a long series of experiments, and I was finally able to sit down, and I started to use R at the time, and I was really excited about making my plots. And when I plotted my data, it looked like something like this thing you see here, pretty much like it. And the thing that I also had the dispersion of using points, so the gaps were even bigger. And I sat there, and I remember sitting in the computer, looking at the plot, and feeling like this. I had literally no idea of what to do with the data, and I was lost. So I went to a friend, and this is I talked with him about having this, and I basically say, I have my data, looks weird. I don't think I know how to analyze it. And I was telling him, I think I should be learning more statistics because I really don't feel that all the tools I have learned up to this point can prepare me to analyze this data. And he said something that made me think, and he said, but you're not a biostatistician, right? And I didn't have any words. His answer took me by, his question actually took me by surprise. And I couldn't tell him anything at the time. But going back to this conversation and what I've said before, over time I have come to realize that we should think like a biostatistician. We are not biostatisticians, but it would help us tremendously if we thought like a biostatistician. And going back to the point I was making before, is this quote from this paper that says, misinterpretation and abuse of statistical tests, confidence intervals, and statistical power have been decried for decades, and yet they remain rampant. So this happens still a lot. And this gets me so after the conversation and after a couple more years and doing more work, I had this question in my mind: is why do we keep repeating the same mistakes in biomedical research? Why, if we know that we have these problems, we still make the same mistakes? And I can tell you that from my own experience, there's a big struggle in biomedical research with this, because we, especially in the field where we work with preclinical models. So say you work with cells, with animals, with tissues, and we do not get a very good training in statistics most of the time. So in these areas, we see these problems a lot. So I believe that part of the reason why we see this problem, and it's still ongoing, is because the way we teach statistics is we want to do recipes. That's how I call it. And how does a recipe looks like? A statistical recipe is, well, say going to the plot I had before, you get some data over time. You collect some repeated measures data, longitudinal data. The recipe you learn, it goes something like this. So you get your data, you do repeated measures ANOVA. Why? Don't ask, just do it. And then if you get p below 0.05, you can do some post-hoc comparisons, and you're done, right? But the big thing that is missing in all of this is why. We never learn why. We only apply the recipe, and then we have problems with significance, right? So it's pretty well known that p-values are not what we think we are most of the time, but we want to learn, we want to do recipes. That's the point I want to make here. And this brings me to the core of my talk, which is I believe that to make reproducibility a core part of biomedical research, and to make it relatable to future trainees, there are some things we should change about. What I think that those are is that we need to rethink the skills that we should teach and learn early, because most of the time, and this is my experience, this is what happened to me, I didn't learn in a good way. I made a lot of mistakes, and then it's much harder to try to fix things when you're way down the road than say you learn things well early in your career. You won't have to struggle so much. So that's really important. We should also emphasize the rationale behind the methods we use statistically. We want to learn recipes, and that's going to give us the same results over and over. We need to understand why we're doing what we're doing. And also, we need to normalize the use of tools that make statistical analysis reproducible. So for the rest of this talk, I will briefly touch on each of these 3 points and expand a little bit more what I mean here. And my core point is that we cannot have reproducible biomedical research if we do not have good statistical practices, because we actually need both of them. So regarding skills, well, so I said before that I learned statistics learning about samples about machines in a factory, counting people. No offense to people in demography, but this didn't have any connection to what I was doing. So I think we should learn early on that if you want to learn statistics, we should learn that data is messy. So last year at our medicine conference, Peter Higgins had a really good talk about this package he has for R, which is basically a collection of medical data that you can use to learn and teach statistics. So I think if you use data that has a connection to what you're doing, it's more likely that you're going to understand the principles, and you're going to be more interested in learning the whys than instead of using examples that are old and do not have any connection to what you're doing. And there are multiple resources for this. So medical data, this R package is good. This is one option. There's a site called PhysioNet where you can also get data sets for that have a biomedical connection. So the tools and the resources are out there. We should be using them at default to teach statistics in biomedical research. And the other important thing is that data cleaning is an important skill to learn. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in the next couple of slides. And what I say why data cleaning is important is because we pretty much all the time we really like Excel, right? But there are better ways of doing stuff. R, for example, and I talk here in this talk about R because I love it. I use it all the time. But there are other ways. The point is, we are pretty much accustomed to a click approach in statistics and biomedical research. What I mean by that is that you wanna be good at your biology background, you wanna be good at doing your experiments, but when it comes to statistics, most people ask, hey, which program are you using? They give a name and then they tell you, you put this number here, you put this number here, you click here, you click here, you click here, and then you're done. And this is a big problem because coding actually forces you to think about what you're doing and why you're doing. So if you're doing coding for your stats, that's a huge advantage because that will not only force you to make things, you know, to maintain things so you can go back and read things and not get lost, but it will also force you to learn about and understand better what you're doing. So I think this is really, really important. For stats in biomedical research, we really like things that are prepackaged, but I don't think those are really useful in a statistical context. So coding is really, really important. Now, the truth is that coding, it takes practice, and it's going to help you to understand what's going on. And as this meme here says, your code is not going to be pretty, but it's going to do what you need to do. And you can then go back and change a couple of things and improve your code over time. And in my experience, you know, this happened to me as well. When I started with R, I keep a repo that I did, I think, back in 2017 or 18 when I started. My code there, I cringe every time I open that repo, but it also helps me to see my journey, how things have changed, and how things have improved for me over time. So this is a good way of knowing what you're doing and keeping track of things you're doing. And jumping now to the rationale behind statistical methods. So as I said before, too often we want to teach recipes. And the truth is that those recipes get passed to the next generation in a word of mouth way. So we don't like to even read the stats books, to put it that way. And then the problem is that your statistical analysis is going to become really mechanic. And it's, again, open this program, click here, copy this value, and then you're done. Or talk with X or Y person that in this lab has this package, has this Excel spreadsheet where you can put your data in. Those things propagate the same mistakes, and then you really never understand why you're doing what you're doing. And then you repeat the same mistakes. And the problem is that you're going to repeat the same mistakes. And when the time comes for you to train someone or to help someone, you are going to pass those mistakes to them as well. Now, this book is pretty well known, I believe, between the audience and this conference, but this is called Statistical Rethinking. And I learned about this book when I was early in my statistical journey. I think it's a great book. I love it. And I think one of the reasons why I really like this book is because when I started reading it, it was nothing like all the other stats books I had read before. It was more like a story. You had to learn and understand. And I quote this from the preface from the second edition, which says, "This book teaches the material in an often inconvenient fashion, forcing you to perform step-by-step calculations that are usually automated. And the reason for all the algorithmic fuss is to ensure that you understand enough of the details to make reasonable choices and interpretations in your own modeling work." So I think this is really crucial, because if you do not understand what you're doing, you won't care about making reproducible. So this here, I think, is also what if you don't take anything else from my talk today, what I believe is important is that we need to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. Because until we do not care about this, and for a statistical standpoint in biomedical research, we will never care about making our work reproducible. But here, this brings another problem, right? And is that math is necessary, but in biomedical research, we are not actually, we do not have the time to sit and derive all the equations and all the stuff. We need to aim to be rigorous without getting lost in the crevices of the mathematical notation. Because I know from my own experience, when you open a stats book and you see those crazy equations, you say, nope, I just better go and ask someone about how to do this and that. We get scared by mathematical stats, but I believe it's necessary to a point to understand what you're doing. But when we teach this, we shouldn't scare people by putting a lot of equations and making them feel lost. I also have something important that I think is important is it's important to let the students connect the dots. Sometimes the way I learn some things where you get this, you do this, and then you get this result. It's better if you tell them, here's the data, how do you think you can work with it? What assumptions you're making when you're analyzing the data, and that will help them a lot. I have an unpopular opinion. I have done a little bit of digging, and I have noticed that in most PhD or grad school programs, we only learn statistics in a semester. I think that the truth is that for type of data we get these days in our context now in biomedical research, we actually should be taking at least 2 semesters of stats. Because that semester is usually just for frequencies, t-test, ANOVA, that kind of stuff. You never get to know about Bayes, or you never get to know about semi-parametric methods, which are really useful. So I believe we should also, make as a core requisite that we take 2 semesters. That will give us, I think, at least enough time to learn something else that will keep our interest and help us with the research. Now moving on to the tools. So the tools are good for, each tool has a purpose, right? That's what I'm trying to say. Each tool has a purpose. Excel is probably good if you are trying to get your CSV files, or you want to do something quick, but that's not going to be helpful for trying to repeat the same statistical analysis. So there are better ways to do it. Interestingly enough, and unless you're doing bioinformatics or you're doing genomics, most people don't have an idea what GitHub is, as crazy as that might sound. Having an account here can really open up for a lot of avenues, and you can even help you to collaborate with other people. You cannot do that with Excel alone. So GitHub, GitLab, whatever things that allows you to share, maintain code, share code with people, those things are really helpful. And some good stats books. So there's a lot of material out there. I have to acknowledge that not all books work in the same way for all people. Books I like are Statistical Rethinking, Generalized Dynamics Models, and this other one called An Introduction to Generalized Linear Models. So those 3 books helped me a lot to understand the reasons why I was doing what I was doing, but there are plenty. There's an infinite number of books out there. Take time to do some reading, see what's out there, and see which type of book helps you to learn in the best way. So those resources are free most of the time. We all need to take advantage of them. And tools that can make research reproducible. So, R Markdown allows you to put code and comment your code and intertwine text, really helpful. But there are other tools. If you like Python, you can do Jupyter books. any of these things that allow you to annotate code, maintain code, share code, and keep you keep you help you be accountable in a way, those tools are great, and they are free most of the time. So we should take advantage of all of this. So I'm going to wrap up things and just say that we need to normalize better statistical practices in biomedical research if we want to make reproducibility a core component that gets ingrained into us early in our careers. If we focus on the rationale of the statistical methods we use, if we teach skills and tools that emphasize reproducibility, things are going to be much easier to do. We won't have to struggle a lot later on, and you will save yourself a lot of pain. And the tools, are there. This was probably not the case maybe 10 years ago, but now the truth is that the tools to help you to make your research reproducible are there. It's just a matter of using them and sharing them with other people, and that can help, I believe, the field tremendously. And those were the things I wanted to say today. I would like to just acknowledge people at my lab at the University of Arkansas and our funding agencies. And here's my contact information. So if you want to send me an email or talk, I'm more than happy to do it. And I'm always looking for projects to collaborate. So that'll be all. And thank you. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Thanks very much, Ariel. Really appreciate your talk. Does anyone have any questions or comments? What was the process of going through rethinking like for you? Presumably you don't have much of a community there, so you were doing it by yourself. I mean, did it take you months or years?
You mean the book?
Yeah.
Well, it took me a while, and I never did like the whole book. I did, I think, the first 3 chapters at once, and then I moved into the 5th. I was looking, trying to fill some gaps I had. But yeah, so I mean, I want to say physically I was alone, but I was relying heavily on the people online that have used the book and have gone through it and have some examples and some additional things. That was really helpful. That's something else. There's people out there that are interested in this kind of stuff and probably are not close to you physically, but within the virtual universe, they're close. They are really helpful most of the time.
Are there any other questions? Oh, we've got lots in the chat. So Frida says, are there specific guidelines in biomedical research journals for ensuring reproducibility, or is it more lenient than in genomics?
Good question. So I believe there are guidelines. That's true. I don't remember the name of the guidelines, but there are a couple of papers that have been published within the last 10 years, I want to say, giving some outline of how we should share our data. But most of the time, it's up to you. Unless you're doing, bioinformatics and genomics, which completely different areas. But what I've seen is that some journals now are requiring you to share your data, and if you have code, they ask you to share it. But at large, it's not required. So you can get by, say, we got this result, we got p of 0.5, and that's it.
And Bonnie says, in which way do you believe statistical training can help make research reproducible? Is it more about having p-values or statistical bounds all over your results? In and of itself does not guarantee others will be able to reproduce.
So, really good question. I believe that statistical training can help you. So I think the way it works is that when you learn statistics, you believe that the p-values are like the top of the mountain, the more you go through it, turns out that that's not the case. So what I believe is that a good statistical training can help you be more critical about your own work, about your results, and know the limitations of what you're doing. Because this is something I think is a huge problem. Most of the time, we tend to oversell what we do, but it's not because we want to do it purposely. It's because we don't know the limitations of what we're doing, and getting a good statistical training can help you to better know where the boundaries are and keep your feet on the ground. That's how I see it.
I would like to say thank you very much, Ariel. I really appreciate your talk.
Thank you.